Okay, another question? Yes.
You've spoken about some of the leadership qualities that have helped you be an effective member of Congress over the years. And I'm wondering what other qualities have helped you be such a maverick and how they've changed over time, how you've seen some being more appropriate in your earlier days when the face of Congress was different, and which ones now help you.
Well, first of all, I think the test of leadership is whether there's followership. It's all well and good to be independent of thought and deviate sometimes from the party line, but if nobody follows you, what good is that? Doesn't accomplish anything. It will get you a few headlines, and you get the satisfaction of reading your name in the paper and saying this is an independent maverick or something, but that's not much good. I think the qualities you need, first of all, you've got to be a good listener, and we're not good enough of that, any of us in the Congress. We're so used to talking that we sometimes don't take the time just to listen. And we're so busy, and I would suggest that one of the fallacies, one thing that should change, members of Congress shouldn't be like I was 2 Congresses ago. Chairman of the Science Committee, senior member of the Transportation Committee, senior on the Intelligence Committee, and the Speaker asked me if I would be part of the forming block for this new Committee on Homeland Security. And then, in the midst of all this, Porter Goss is designated by the President of the United States to be the next director of the CIA, so he steps down as Chairman of Intelligence. Then, in addition to being Chairman of the Science Committee, I was acting Chairman of Intelligence at a time when the profile was at an all-time high because you had the 9/11 Commission reporting. So one of the things I would strongly recommend that leaders of the future consider is having members be more of specialists and narrow their area of responsibility, because I used to, in my younger days as a staff member, I used to laugh when we compared the House and the Senate, because I used to say to people, look what happens when they're in the meeting. The House members, they'll meet and they'll ask questions. The Senate members, a senator will come in, drop in for a cameo appearance, he listens to a staff member gives him a question, he asks a question, not even sure he fully comprehends the context or the question, and then answered, and then he gets up and goes out to the next one. And the rule always used to be, and now we're just as bad as the Senate and the House, that invariably the House would prevail in a conference. Because when you get in a conference and you've got 2 separate versions of the same bill passed, and you're negotiating and trying to reach a compromise, the House members were invariably more knowledgeable. And invariably, when push comes to shove and it gets to the crunch, the principals and not the staff have to make the ultimate decisions. So you had the more knowledgeable House members minus the staff dealing with, and understandably, Senate members who are not as knowledgeable because they're spread so thin and didn't have the benefit of the staff, and the House would win. But now we're as bad as the Senate.
And that, coming from a House member, is quite condemnation. What is the expression that the Democrats are the opponents and the Senate is the enemy? Isn't that usually what they say in the House?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Any other questions from students? Yes, sir.
I think one of the concerns that seem to be appearing in more recent decades of Congress is the issue of partisan gerrymandering of congressional districts. I wonder if you feel that it is a serious problem. Also, one of the other concerns people tend to bring up is the fact that as the United States population has increased, that increasingly congressmen are representing larger districts and even larger numbers of people, and it's harder to reach the concerns of those people. Dealing with gerrymandering, that also brings into question the ability to respond to the needs of constituents. I wonder if you could speak to those issues, and if you do see them as problems, what sort of solutions you would offer.
Well, the purist in me says that it's all wrong the way we do it now. The partisan in me says it's working just fine, thank you, because it works decidedly to the Republicans' advantage. But I haven't given a great deal of thought to it, except because I've been a beneficiary of that, the way it works. But incidentally, there's some fallacies in the present system, even among those of us who are Republican and acknowledge that the present system works to the advantage of a Republican. When they redistrict New York State, for example, the state legislature, do you think they care what the hell someone like me in Washington has to say? They don't pay much attention to that. Those guys are all jockeying up there because you've got an ambitious senator or assemblyman who wants to restructure the district to suit his or her interest, and they don't care what the congressman has to say. I would think that the good government groups, Common Cause comes to mind immediately, other good government groups, should really start a national movement to insist that we have independent, scholarly type commissions that would deal with this subject. Now, my partisan friends, no matter which side of the aisle they come from, would be madder than heck at me for saying that, but it ain't fair in the present system.
But also, hasn't the system by which each political party gets basically a safe seat, Republicans are elected from almost all Republican districts, Democrats from almost all Democratic districts, hasn't it had two consequences? Number one, incumbents, such as yourself, are rarely defeated, making it more difficult for fresh faces and voices to come in. And number two, the Republicans and Democrats who are elected from those solidly partisan districts are much more at the extreme ends of the ideology of their parties. Aren't those two consequences?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, you put your finger right on it. That shows that you're a pro, you've been around, you understand the whole system. I mean, if I were tailoring districts, the ideal district would have some in some areas of the country you don't have inner cities. I mean, you just don't have it. But upstate New York, my district, one of the things that I prided myself on was that my district, although decidedly Republican in advantage, it's not overwhelmingly Republican, but there are more Republicans than Democrats, but an increasing number of independents, and that's healthy. You try to get the districts more evenly balanced, R's versus D, but then you try to get a city, suburbs, and farm country. I mean, there's some members, I can predict to you how they're going to vote on every single issue. If your whole district is in Bronx, within 3 blocks, you know how that person's going to vote. And I guarantee that person's a Democrat, and that person's going to probably vote for every social benefit program that comes down the pike, because his district is largely dependent on these social benefit programs. Or if you're from a state like, well, take a state like Montana. Well, I can almost predict with certainty how that guy is going to vote, particularly on all the ag issues. And it's not going to be dairy interest, it's going to be grain interest. And so, but if you mix up the pot, so to speak, and you have 435 people who have some exposure to the problems faced by the inner cities, and they might be small inner cities, not all are from states with urban centers, and you have some suburbs where people are a little more affluent and they're doing a little bit better, and you have some rural area where they're in a variety of different things, you'll have a better, broader understanding of the total. But now you have people that you guarantee they're all going to be for big cotton or the Texans. Can you imagine a Texan voting against big oil? I don't care if he's a Republican or Democrat. You know, so that's the commissions, take it out of the political process, fair, more balanced districts.
Another question from a student?
Congressman, I'm just wondering, regardless of how Congress turns out after this fall's elections, I'm wondering what you think would be the best things that Congress could do to improve its performance the next term.
Well, Linda Douglas touched on it earlier, the need for more oversight. I think public confidence in Congress is eroding. Some things are not a fair indictment. Other things probably are. I mean, this whole unfolding Foley scandal, if you will, I think is an unfair indictment. Look at this guy is guilty, apparently, everything we know, some of it acknowledged publicly, of something that's totally unacceptable, totally unacceptable. And so there are too many people out there saying, well, they're all like that. Well, like hell, we're not all like that. I mean, I spoke to a group the other night of fellow Republicans. It was a county dinner in Amsterdam, New York. And they were sort of down because they said, gee, keep reading the paper, we're under siege and we might lose the majority and it's all terrible and all because of Foley. And I said, give me a break. I happen to be Catholic. You know, there's been reports, high-profile reports, over the last couple of years about some members of the clergy who have been involved in totally unacceptable conduct for anyone. Does that mean I should stop going to Mass or give up my religion? No. And so if a Republican is guilty of something wrong, does that mean all the other Republicans are bad? The answer is no. So I think we've got to be more conscious of our image, quite honestly. And we've got to do a little polishing up. I remember after the baseball strike a few years back, I mean, the fans were fed up to here. And that's sort of an analogy I would draw today. A lot of people are fed up to here with what's going on in Washington. Does that mean everything's wrong in Washington and everybody has to be changed? No. But it means we better take stock of how we are perceived out beyond the Beltway, as they say, that big, long highway 66 miles around the nation's capital, in the real world. And we ought to be conscious of how they view us and what they think about us. And we ought to try to correct a wrong impression. And I think many of the impressions are wrong.